You guys ready to go?
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's do it. Let's go. Yeah.
Okay. What's up, Nova Nation, and welcome to Cats on the Court. I'm Victoria Newsom. I'm here with David Shapansky and Stephen Kane, and we have a lot to talk about with Villanova basketball, especially as the season heats up. So let's go through the schedule.
Coming up this week, a lot of games. We're going to start off on Monday with Villanova men's basketball season opener on the 4th against Lafayette, 8 p.m., so a late tip-off from the Finn guys. And then on Wednesday afternoon, more Villanova men's basketball action against Columbia. That game is at 7 p.m., also at the Finn. And then on Friday, so 3 full games this week, Villanova will take on NJIT. Another late Friday night hoops tip-off at 8:30 p.m. at the Finn. And that's not it for Villanova basketball this week. On Sunday, Villanova women's basketball will be in action for their season opener at 2 p.m. against Wake Forest for their season opener at the Finn. A lot to look forward to this week.
And we have a lot to talk about. Speaking of Eric Dixon, I mean, he's facing suspension right now, and that first game is on Monday. Who do you feel will step up in his place?
Yeah, and I think that's a great question. I mean, Villanova, this is a team last year that averaged about 70 points per game, and really down the stretch in some crucial games, obviously against tougher opponents in Lafayette in Big East play. But Villanova really struggled to find ways to create offense at times. And when you take away your leading scorer who was averaging more than 16 points per game, you have to find that offense somewhere. So I think for Villanova, the main kind of guy that has to step up, I think, is Jordan Longino. And this is a guy who's very capable. I mean, not just in the scoring aspect, but he's a pretty good rebounder. He can get some assists as well. And, last year, unfortunately, was plagued with injuries, and that's kind of been a theme throughout his college career, unfortunately. But, I mean, Jordan Longino, I think, would definitely be the guy for me.
I agree. I mean, 21 points in that exhibition game against Robert Morris. I mean, he was on fire. We saw Eric Dixon back on fire. I mean, Stephen, you have any thoughts to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, for me, Jordan Longino is certainly a great response, David, but I'm going to go with the new transfer they got, the 6'11" big guy, Enoch Boakye from Fresno State. He had a double-double in that charity exhibition game against Robert Morris, and he co-led the team in offensive rebounds. And David, you talked about it. It wasn't the best season for Villanova last year. Really, the two main reasons for that, lack of consistent three-point shooting and poor offensive rebounding. Enoch Boakye, one of the best offensive rebounders in the transfer portal. Really excited to see what he can do, especially being that main guy in the front court. Usually it's going to be Eric Dixon and Enoch Boakye, but for the season opener game against Lafayette, it'll just be Enoch. So excited to see what he can do.
We need a lot of power on both offense and defense this year. Fingers crossed. But definitely moving on, who are you really looking to see step up as a star on the men's team? I know you talked a little bit about it, but anyone you're especially interested in seeing right out the gate?
Yeah, I mean, I think Longino, as I went back to in the first question, is probably the guy that you're looking for the most, just because, I mean, he's really kind of a question mark, because last year, before he got injured kind of midway in the schedule, I mean, he was starting in some games. He was the sixth man, go-to off the bench and contributing around double digits points. I think for a good majority of that first half of the season, he was averaging more than 9 points per game. And then, after the injury, he kind of slid off a little bit. But I also think for Villanova, Jameer Brickus is that guy really early on that I'm excited to see really how he controls the offense. I mean, this is the first time in a few years that Villanova has really had a point guard, a true point guard that can take the ball up the court. And I still think there's some questions on if his success, against LaSalle and from a weaker conference can translate over to the Big East. But I mean, 10 assists against Robert Morris. I mean, he really knows how to control the offense, a lot of veteran experience, and Coach Neptune talks so highly about his leadership.
Yeah, and then for me, I would probably go with Wooga Poplar, right? He was the only transfer that Villanova got from a Power 4 conference. This is a guy who played 4 seasons of really quality basketball for the Miami Hurricanes, was a big part of that Final Four run they had a couple years ago, back in 2022-23 season. And last season in particular, got some All-ACC nods, 13 points a game, 4 rebounds on some limited minutes. Really great three-point shooter. Again, talked about it earlier when talking about Enoch Boakye. A big reason this Villanova team struggled was the lack of consistent three-point shooting. Hopefully Wooga Poplar can bring more of that to this Villanova team.
I agree. Mr. Miami himself has a lot to step up to. And moving on, I mean, what are some predictions you have for these first 3 solid games in men's and then even in women's?
I think for Villanova, I mean, it would be great to win all 3, right? And they're going to be favored to win all 3 games. I think we can agree about that. But, I mean, the real question for Villanova is how do they come out in the game against Lafayette, right? And I'm sure that Coach Neptune has had this team practice, without Eric Dixon to kind of get them ready for this game and who's going to get his minutes, which we could also talk about more. But I think for Villanova, the main key is how do you handle being without Eric Dixon. So for Villanova, I think the game against Lafayette is going to be closer than, would have been, of course, if Eric Dixon plays, but also maybe closer than the Vegas odds maybe think that he's, the score will be. But for Villanova, I think it sets up pretty nicely. They're better than all three teams. They're better than Lafayette, Columbia, and NJIT. So hopefully it's a pretty fun week at the Fin, and I think it will be.
And we've also heard a lot about Kyle Neptune saying how he wants to get everyone involved in the mix and really seeing how that roster works out and the chemistry on the team. Where do you see that going to?
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, because I mean, last year you saw how much the transfers. It took them some time to get used to this Villanova offense, right? TJ Bamba coming in, it took him some time as well as some of the other transfers. And this year it's the same thing. And I think that you can kind of teach them, of course, the offense and how to get involved in the plays. But I think it's that Villanova attitude, which I think the guys will pick up pretty quickly. But it takes some time to kind of get used to that, and building chemistry with guys like Eric Dixon and Jordan Longino, who have both been here for a long time. So I think that will definitely take some time, right? And Coach Neptune has talked about that throughout his press conferences the past few weeks. I mean, it is a work in progress, and that is really true. It's going to take some time for these transfers to get used to this team and get used to how this offense runs.
Absolutely. Anything you want to add?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with what David was saying. This Villanova team in years past, the non-conference schedule, it has been a bit rough, I think, to put it lightly at times, and they do have a tendency maybe to start out slow, but as the season progresses, they do play a lot better basketball. That is Coach Neptune's mantra, that they want to play their best basketball by the end of the season. So I do think the first couple games, I agree with David, I think they win all of them pretty handedly, but I think particularly that first game against Lafayette, don't be surprised that first half maybe they struggle a bit, maybe they're only up by 5 to 6 at halftime, but then the second half, they really show their quality. Guys like Wooga, Jameer Brickus really take over, really establish some consistency in that backcourt, and Villanova wins by 10 plus. Maybe they don't cover the spread, but I think Villanova does a good job in that one.
And now we have our stat of the week. All right, take it away, Stephen.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot to pick from. Villanova, they played their charity exhibition game against Robert Morris, the Colonials, back on Sunday. Villanova, they won that game 87-74. And David, you talked about it earlier, but my stat of the week is just Jordan Longino in general. His performance was really great. 21 points, 8 for 12 from the field, 3 for 4 from 3. And maybe the most important stat, 3 offensive rebounds, all in quick succession of one another. In particular, just want to highlight, and again, we talked about this a little bit earlier for the main men's basketball portion of the show. But again, this Villanova team did really struggle in terms of making threes. They took a lot of threes, but weren't making a lot of them. And then in terms of offensive rebounding percentage, they were in the 290s nationally. I mean, there's only 330 D1 teams in college basketball. So it's encouraging to see Jordan Longino just knock down a bunch of threes, get some offensive rebounds. This team, basically, long story short, needs a lot more of that. And just with Jordan Longino in general, Coach Neptune, he talked a lot about how this has been a very beneficial season for him. It's really his first off season that he's been fully healthy. He's kind of had some injury problems lately, and he's always been a very versatile defender, but the struggles have been on the offensive side. But Neptune in particular talked about how he's retooled his jump shot. He's gotten a lot more comfortable with the basketball. Sometimes he'd have some turnover issues. So really a lot to be excited about, and hopefully as the season goes on, I mean, that first game against Lafayette, he'll probably have an even bigger role with Eric Dixon out. Maybe he'll be the starting 4, we'll see, in that front court along Enoch Bawache. He'll get a lot of opportunities to showcase not just what he can do defensively, but maybe that offensive progression that we saw against Robert Morris. Really excited to see what Jordan Longino can bring this season.
Thank you so much for watching the first edition of Cats on the Court. I mean, we're so ready for this season, and we hope you guys are too. Make sure to follow WXVU and tune in to the radio on game days, and follow VTV for more updates, especially VTV Sports. Thank you, and have a great night.